I hope folks will listen to this piece with an open mind and consider what I uncovered and what I'm going to lay out here. Uh, Ms. Gabbard, Ms. Tulsi Gabbard, formerly of the Bernie Sanders movement, we know her very well. We know her and have loved her probably longer than her newfound conservative fans have. So she's getting a lot of press this week. It really started, I think, with Jeffrey Sachs on the Tucker Carlson show, um, talking about how much of a threat the deep state considers her.
Probably, and I don't want to jinx anything, she's probably the most important appointment of the Trump administration.
It does seem that way.
She is incredibly intelligent, incredibly honest, incredibly committed to U.S. security, and would do a superb job. So that's why she's being opposed, because the forces that be that are worse than mediocre, that are right now on top of a $1.5 trillion a year machine, that have been running disastrous wars, that have been bringing us closer and closer to doom, don't want any accountability. And what Tulsi Gabbard would represent is competence, honesty, forthrightness, and not having been a party to all these failures.
Now I have to say, and we'll get into it a little more. I have recommended that interview. Jeffrey Sachs said a lot of really interesting and I think very true things there. Why he would claim that somebody who, as we will see, and as everyone should know, but we'll lay out the receipts, has been on every side of every issue. If there's a single issue that she has not been on every side of, I'd like to know what that issue is. He would describe this person as honest and steadfast. It's remarkable to me. It's remarkable to me that he would make that claim. So now Tucker Carlson, I guess maybe that's what put it in his ear, but at Turning Points USA, he kind of backed that up and built on it.
Critical appointment because she has the ability to declassify the truth about what your government has been doing in your name with your money for decades. No one doubts that Tulsi Gabbard's a patriotic person. She's an Army officer. She served in the U.S. military for 20 years. So, by the way, if she was a foreign agent, how exactly is she carrying a gun in the U.S. military? It's absurd. You will know who's on which side by the reaction of Tulsi Gabbard. If there are Republican senators who are voting against Tulsi Gabbard's confirmation, then you either in the Intel Committee or in the Open Senate, you will know that person is not only my enemy as someone who voted for change, for openness, for transparency, for an end to corruption, for a draining of the swamp. You know that person is an enemy of the United States, period. It's really that simple. And you will get the same story. Oh, it's national security. We can't let our enemies know. We can't trust Tulsi Gabbard. No, we can't trust you, actually. This is going to take place in the open, assuming we get that.
Surrendered to the communists.
Okay, so I want to make it clear that we are not in any way, shape, or form over the course of this segment claiming that Tulsi is a Russian asset. What there is a fair amount of evidence that she is an American intelligence asset. In fact, she literally is. And that may explain why she's been on every side of every issue. It could just be that she's a particularly unscrupulous politician, as there's clearly evidence of by being on every side of every issue. It could be that she gets directives on what side of the issue she needs to be on based on where her handlers want to position her. Now, I know there are a lot of people who talk about AOCIA who believe that, with some justification, that the CIA reached out to AOC while she was in college and that they groomed her and ran her to be in Congress to act as an undermining of left energy and labor organizing energy. And yes, there's some evidence for that. There's at least as much, if not more, evidence that Tulsi Gabbard has been set up to be in exactly the position that she is now, sheepdogging former left people or Bernie people into a right-wing movement whose actual agenda is completely compatible with the agenda of the military-industrial complex and the deep state, and to give it some kind of a populist, anti-deep state branding. So let's take a look at where Tulsi Gabbard started, how it started. This is 2018. Israel needs to stop using live ammunition in its response to unarmed protesters in Gaza. It has resulted in over 50 dead and thousands seriously wounded. Okay, Michael Tracy, we're going to be drawing on his reporting a lot. Part of Tulsi Gabbard's conversion into a Republican operative has entailed her declaring that the goal of Hamas is world domination. World domination. Yes, they're trying to take over the world. That alone should be a disqualifying claim to be taken seriously.
Right.
Calling protesters against the Israeli pulverization campaign puppets, and bizarrely claiming Biden hasn't adequately condemned anti-Semitism. Okay, so let's take a look at this clip.
Islamism is very directly a political Islam whose goal is world domination under Islamic law. That is the goal of groups like Hamas and Al-Qaeda and ISIS and others. So we have to be very clear about that. Unfortunately, what we're seeing on our college campuses are not these protests actually truly calling for peace, understanding the dangers of the situation there. They have become puppets of this radical Islamist organization that stands diametrically opposed to our ideology of freedom. And unfortunately, President Biden, he seems to be afraid of being called an Islamophobe, which is why he's shirking away from a very clear statement of standing against anti-Semitism, for free speech, and against this radical Islamist ideology.
It's just a version of you're woke, right?
Yes.
You're woke.
Okay. All right. I'm sorry. So you have a lot of people coming and talking about Tulsi Gabbard as somebody who's gonna restore freedom and hold the deep state accountable. That's you couldn't have more of a series of deep state talking points, right down to the protesters not being for peace, the protesters being Islamists. Please, I don't get it. I don't understand why anyone believes, based on her statements, that Tulsi Gabbard is some kind of a threat to the system. I really listen to what she's actually saying. Now, again, she's been on all sides of every issue. Here's Tulsi Gabbard back in 2019 talking about Donald Trump's fitness to be commander-in-chief.
He's essentially pimping out our men and women in uniform to...
Wow, that is very strong language. Pimping out our men and women in uniform.
Foreign power who's the highest bidder, and saying very
the highest bidder,
very directly, well, hey, look, they're paying us for them. He is unfit to be our commander-in-chief, and what he is doing is dishonoring the service and the sacrifice that every single one of these service members is doing for our country, and the service and sacrifice that their loved ones and their family members go through.
Okay. All right. So what did she have to say when he took out Soleimani in Iran? Did she support that? What did she have to say about that? Because Trump's saying some very strong words about Iran in this campaign, and he said very strong words and took very strong actions in his first term. What did she say about that?
We've heard Trump supporters and President Trump basically say, look, no American casualties, and we took out a bad guy, Soleimani, a terrorist leader. What would your response to that be?
Well, first, I just came from the intelligence briefing that the administration came and brought to Congress. Really, they provided vague comments,
no justification whatsoever for this illegal and unconstitutional act of war that President Trump took.
You don't buy the imminent
No.
attack against Americans?
No, they failed to provide any compelling information to prove their point of imminence. And really, it brings us to the central question here, which is our country's national security better off because of Donald Trump's actions and decision? The answer to that is no.
Huh. Okay. All right. Well, that's pretty decisive. This is how she responded to him taking out Soleimani, something he still brags about. So what does she say now?
A vote for Kamala Harris is a vote for Dick Cheney, and it's a vote for war, more war, likely World War III and nuclear war. A vote for Donald Trump is a vote for a man who wants to end wars, not start them, and who has demonstrated already that he has the courage and strength to stand up and fight for peace.
Huh. That's very different from what you were saying before. And if anything, earlier in the show, you showed that clip of him critiquing the Iraq war. He's more bellicose in this campaign, I would say, than he was in 2016. I would say he had much more reason to believe he was going to be anti-war back then. I mean, now he's just openly supporting Israel, threatening Iran. He made some vague noises about Ukraine, but he's speaking much more loudly in who he's picking to surround himself with, people who say they're hand in glove with Jake Sullivan. So that is really remarkable for Jeffrey Sachs to claim that she's a person of integrity. I mean, we've just seen she's all over the place with no real explanation for why she would have changed her mind. It's not like Trump was more war hawkish in his first term and now he has more peaceful rhetoric. It's actually the opposite. So what is he talking about? So Michael Tracy did a pretty good piece on this. He's been all over the cabinet appointments. But apparently in 2020, he focused on covering her campaign. So he has a lot of knowledge of Gabbard's history and her statements. Tulsi Gabbard ran an entire presidential campaign advocating for such things as federal codification of abortion rights, eliminating fossil fuels, banning assault weapons, unraveling virtually all U.S. sanctions, condemning Israel for its, quote, illegal occupation, unquote, of Palestine, as well as denouncing Trump for betraying his voters, violating the Constitution, and running an imperial foreign policy that was hurtling the world into war and nuclear apocalypse. She subsequently abandoned these positions because an opportunity arose to insinuate herself into the Republican Party, which of course requires abandoning any critique of Trump. This was to be accomplished by a steadfast campaign of aggressive memory holing, along with throwing a bunch of culture war red meat to Republican voters, a tactic she also used to ridicule. Tulsi Gabbard used to routinely castigate Trump for being surrounded by warmongers like Mike Pompeo, John Bolton, and Nikki Haley. Trump has now appointed ideologically indistinguishable people to those exact same positions. Marco Rubio, Mike Waltz, and Elise Stefanik. But her earlier critique will, of course, need to vanish because making an honest critique is no longer compatible with her pursuit of power. People keep telling me she changed her mind. Not to me vain, but I did cover her more closely than literally anyone else in the United States. If she has changed her mind and, for instance, no longer believes that Donald Trump facilitated, quote, genocide in his first term by arming the Saudi pulverization of Yemen, she should explain why she decided to retract that position. There is zero indication that Trump intends to adjust his policy towards Saudi Arabia in the slightest. If anything, he's pledged to double down. She has proven that she no longer holds to the position she once espoused in any discernible fashion. No real through line between now and the 2020 campaign can be reliably traced. Where's the lie? in the 2022 midterms, she bizarrely went around endorsing candidates like Chuck Grassley, Don Bolduc, and Herschel Walker, who had absolutely nothing to do with the position she'd espoused 2 years prior. By this point, she'd become a paid Fox News contributor, which is the surest way to eventually join a Trump administration. In short, she decided to overturn her prior stated convictions in pursuit of power. I consider that crass, unprincipled opportunism, not just randomly changing her mind. Okay, so very well said, as usual, by Michael Tracy. Now, he's only considering one possibility, and it may indeed be the case, and it's all we've really entertained, that she's just she burned her bridges with the Democratic Party. They went after her for endorsing Bernie. They never forgave her. They made her life hell. They accused her of being a Russian puppet. So she went where her bread was buttered. We haven't really considered the other possibility that, like AOCIA, allegedly, she's an op. She's an operative. Now, I know the people who tend to most believe that Tulsi Gabbard is going to overturn the deep state also tend to be deeply suspicious of the WEF. Very suspicious. So it's pretty remarkable that they're not bothered by Tulsi Gabbard having been chosen by the WEF as one of their young global leaders. Now, I know what some people are going to say. She claims she had nothing to do with it. Why are you part of the World Economic Forum? This is in a tweet thread. I'm not. You were featured as one of the young leaders of the World Economic Forum. Gabbard says they put my picture on their site without asking, never had anything to do with them. Now, we always want to be fair. Some other people who have been chosen for that dubious honor claim that, yeah, they just email you and tell you they've chosen you, that it's not like you apply for it or you go through a process. Fair enough. But that doesn't really explain why she tweeted out at the time in 2015, I'm honored to be selected as 2015 Young Global Leader Voices representing #Hawaii amongst leaders from around the world. It seemed like she knew what it was. She claims now she doesn't know what it was. Seems like she knew what it was. She's got a whole graphic there about what it is.
Oh my God.
There you are. Revealed, unmasked. Of course, now she sings a different tune. While we struggle to afford food and fuel, the elite gathered at Davos WEF to discuss how we should be allowed to live our lives. Their totalitarian dream of a so-called Great Reset, where people own nothing and are tracked, monitored with every step, must be condemned by us all. I mean, okay, all right. I mean, you were saying something very different when you were angling for a different track in the establishment, but okay, fine. Your new friends definitely would not like that take. This is much more acceptable to them.
Right, so go back just so we understand that this was from 2015. So this is from before 2015. Long before Trump was a possibility for her, long before any of that, right?
This is when the Democrats.
She was a Democrat, right?
She was their bright, shiny object. They were very excited about her. She was being groomed for one of the top slots, as he says in Apocalypse Now. This is Ben Norton, who has been doing a lot of reporting on Tulsi Gabbard. So what is Tulsi Gabbard up to these days? Tulsi Gabbard, this is 2021, Tulsi Gabbard is still very involved in U.S. imperialist operations around the globe. As recently as 2021, she was part of a shady U.S. military deployment in Africa. Note how she uses war on terror rhetoric to justify her active participation in imperialism. And I also want to point out, we're speculating on the idea that maybe Gabbard is not who we think she is. Maybe she has handlers. Maybe she's an op. It's pretty funny, somebody who went to Syria and made a big show of bucking the establishment about Syria would be doing these operations against Al-Qaeda, which the U.S. backed to topple Assad in Syria, something that she has not said a word about. And this is the same Al-Qaeda that supposedly is motivated by anger about U.S. policy towards Israel that strangely doesn't seem to ever attack Israel or any of Israel's assets. So here's what she said about that.
Aloha, everyone. You haven't heard much from me lately. I've been gone for the last 4 months, serving on an active duty tour and deployment to Africa as a civil affairs officer. I was supporting a special forces mission to go after Al-Qaeda affiliated jihadists. Now, every single day, it was truly my honor to work with incredible patriots, experienced, focused warriors with an unwavering commitment to serve our country. We should never forget that, no matter the decisions that the politicians make or the careerists in the Pentagon make, it is our men.
And listen to this language. Oh, yeah. No, you know what? The careerists and the people in the Pentagon really hate you going and doing deep state shit in Africa. Wow, right. They're shaking in their boots with you doing what you're told as in your capacity as a member of the military. Yeah, you're bucking that system there, Tulsi.
And women in uniform who selflessly and quietly defend the safety, security, and freedom of our country every day. Now, I haven't posted much since I was gone because I was asked not to talk about my going overseas until my mission was complete. Al-Qaeda is very active where we were, and as someone who has a high profile, I would have been a prime target for the enemy, putting my life and the lives of my fellow service members and our mission in greater danger. Now I look forward to discussing the foreign and domestic issues and challenges that we're facing in our country.
Okay. All right. So what's she doing now? So that's what she was doing in 2021. So this is 2023. She tweeted out, "It is truly a privilege to have been selected to serve the soldiers of the 440th Civil Affairs Battalion as their commander. In these times of ever-escalating tensions and global uncertainty, our role as the warrior diplomats of the Army is more important than ever." So let's see. She also sent out a cute video here.
Beautiful day here in Fort Carson, Colorado, and a very special one. I have just completed the change of command ceremony, taking command of the 440th Civil Affairs Battalion. As civil affairs soldiers, we are warrior diplomats, and our mission, our skills, and capabilities are incredibly important during a time of great uncertainty in the world. It's just such an incredible privilege and honor to be entrusted with the responsibility to serve and lead these incredible soldiers.
Okay, it's very heartwarming. So what is the 440th Battalion? A publicity battalion? That sounds really innocent. Tulsi Gabbard is now commander of the U.S. Army's 440th Civil Affairs Battalion, which runs psychological operations, PSYOPs, against civilians in the Indo-Pacific region. Her job is literally to manufacture consent for the U.S. new Cold War on China and expand U.S. imperialism in Asia. And this is from the U.S. Army's own description of what they do. The 440th Civil Affairs Battalion is the newest, I've got to blow up here, is the newest battalion in the United States Civil Affairs and Psychological Operations Command, Airborne. The battalion follows the long and storied history of the Civil Affairs Regiment within the United States Special Operations Command and the United States Army Reserve. The battalion regularly deploys its civil affairs teams and companies throughout the Indo-Pacific region in support of various operations and exercises. The 440th has sent teams to Philippines, Thailand, Malaysia, Timor-Leste, Micronesia, Marshall Islands, Tonga, Palau, Samoa, Fiji, and Papua New Guinea, as well as supported exercises in Korea and Japan. Now, I am sorry, but my understanding of a lot of the people who are very excited about the dismantling of the deep state is that if you have been affiliated with the WEF as a young global leader and tweeted about it, and you are the commander literally of a PSYOP battalion in the U.S. Army, you're probably an op, right? I mean, we assume this about AOC on far less evidence than this. And when you combine that with being on every side of every issue, that seems like an op, right? That seems like you've been told what you need to be doing in order to manipulate the public in a certain electoral direction. Now, I said throughout the entire election, if Trump is allowed to become president, I have to reevaluate what I believe about the deep state, or I have to reevaluate what I believe about Trump. It's starting to look more and more like I have to reevaluate what I believe about Trump, because whatever Trump thinks he is or he isn't, if you look at the people he's appointing, if you look at the people around him, if you look at the people that they're claiming are going to take down this system, looks like a fucking op. It really looks like an op. When you see somebody like Jeffrey Sachs, who certainly should fucking know better, sitting there talking about how Tulsi Gabbard is a person of honor and integrity who's going to dismantle the system, not because she's a Russian op. We're not talking, that's total bullshit. She's an American op. She's an American op. Or she's one of the most unscrupulous politicians that we've seen in recent times. And that's really saying something.
No, I think she's an op. I think she's a Fed. It makes sense. She always gave off this weird vibe, but you couldn't really pin her down. And this seems to confirm that. You know, this is like that scene at the end of The Matrix 2, where you find out that, you know, for the first two movies, you assume Neo was the one.
Right.
And then you realize, no, he's not actually the one. He's just like an unplanned glitch within the system that's like manageable. This is like that. This is like that.
Right.
Trump wasn't actually Neo.
He's
wasn't
not the
actually
one.
Keanu.
He's not the one. Yeah, he's not actually dodging the bullets.
Right.
Okay, so to give you a really good sense of, and hey, again, it could just be unscrupulousness, but Ben Burgess did an article on Jacobin covering some of this history of her various political stances for anyone with a short memory, or people who haven't been following Tulsi as long as us Bernie bros have. Within months of ending her 2020 campaign, she'd switched from a position on abortion so pro-choice she had 100% ratings from Reproductive Freedom for All and Planned Parenthood to introducing a law to ban all abortions after 20 weeks. Why would she have changed that if not to ingratiate herself, or because she was told to ingratiate herself? Similarly, she'd once had a 0% rating from the National Rifle Association and a 100% rating from the Brady campaign to end gun violence. And now she seemed to regret all that, saying in a recent podcast that she changed her positions on issues like assault weapons due to, quote, learning understanding, and that growth in really appreciating our founders' full intent for the Second Amendment. Now, I just want to point out how fucking ridiculous this is. You're talking about somebody who was in Congress for 7 years and who is a member of the military, and she hadn't been educated on the issues surrounding the Second Amendment. She hadn't heard about those issues. She had to educate herself about that. That's why she changed, because she just didn't know about the debates around the Second Amendment. She's made similar about faces on the foreign policy questions that have defined her natural persona. Far from speaking out for Palestinians, while the United States sends 2,000-pound bombs to drop on schools and hospitals and refugee camps, and as part of a war explicitly aimed at regime change in Gaza, no less, Gabbard attended the March for Israel in Washington, D.C. last November. I didn't even know that.
Yeah, oh yeah, she was there. She was there. Yeah,
she's described.
There's one place I'd like to see everyone who was at that rally, and it's not in any government office. It's hell. That's where I think they should be. Hell. Maybe she could be, secretary of hell.
Yeah, she could go dismantle the satanic deep state down there. She's described Western protesters calling for an end to the war as puppets of radical Islamic extremists. At least we can locate a through line here. Earlier, he mentions how she was touting that line during the Obama administration, and celebrated the march in support of Benjamin Netanyahu's war in Washington, D.C., as a matter of standing up against anti-Semitism. It sounds like Tulsi is everything that a lot of the people who want to support her hate, right? I mean, why does she get a pass? So what? She doesn't mean any of it? Okay, then she's a fucking liar, right? I mean, what is it? As Michael Tracy has noted, Trump, quote, has actually increased his financial engagements with the Saudi royal family since Tulsi Gabbard ridiculed him as Saudi Arabia's bitch and accused him of facilitating genocide in Yemen. If Gabbard's own positions on Saudi Arabia and Yemen have shifted, she hasn't said as much in public, and she certainly didn't feel the need to explain the apparent contradiction when she became an outspoken Trump supporter. In fact, when Tulsi joined Trump's entourage at a recent Ultimate Fighting Championship event, she was rubbing shoulders with Yasser al-Ramayan, the head of Saudi Arabia's sovereign wealth fund. Perhaps there was a whispered argument against genocide, but during the parts picked up by the cameras, everyone seemed to be having a good time. Okay, so you got somebody with enough knowledge of these issues to have been calling out Trump rightly for genocide in Yemen, who now is hanging out no problem with the Saudi Arabia head of the sovereign wealth fund, yucking it up. So what you're talking about is either a total scumbag, or you're talking about somebody who takes her orders from somebody and does what she's told. Either way, the idea of celebrating Tulsi Gabbard, who doesn't seem to have a core conviction in her body, makes me feel like I'm taking crazy pills. I do not understand anyone who takes her seriously on any level. I don't understand people who think Trump is going to take down the deep state. Oh, you feel some people are upset about Trump? Sure, man. When one house of an aristocracy loses power to another house of the aristocracy, they're upset about it. Of course, they want to control things, right? But it doesn't mean that the deep state lost. If you really look at all this, if you look at who is Trump appointing, he appoints Mike Huckabee. The Israelis are looking at Mike Huckabee like, this guy's kind of fucked up, man. This guy's got a couple of screws loose. That guy's more Zionist than Netanyahu. Look at who he's picking. Look at who he's surrounding himself with. Are these people saying we need to get out of Ukraine? They're not saying that. Are they saying we need to stop giving all this support to Israel? They're not saying that. How is this a challenge to the deep state? Why, based on Tulsi Gabbard's record, would you think she's anything other than one of the most unscrupulous politicians alive, or a deep state op? And again, a lot of the people who are very concerned with Gabbard going in and taking down the deep state are the same exact people that if you attach this fact pattern to, say, a Democrat, would immediately say they're an op.
Oh, of course. No
of course, absolutely. They're not. They were in the WEF. She's the commander of a PSYOP battalion. It's an op. It's an op. She's reversed her position on everything. So why not here? Why on earth do you trust Cruella de Vil here? Why? So the Tulsi mania that's being ginned up this week, and again by people who I think should know better. I honestly, we had a lot of our own viewers when we've speculated on this over the years have said Trump's an op. Trump's an op. When I've speculated, well, I mean, are they threatened by him? At this point, like, I don't know. Is he? Maybe knowingly, maybe not knowingly. But if you look, okay, suppose you're running the deep state, right? Doesn't it make a lot of sense if you look at the country, assume these people are smart, and I do, assume these people are smart. You look and you say, wow, there's a lot of populist rage in the country right now. And you got a guy like Bernie Sanders gets further than anybody ever expected, right? And that tells you, man, the people are going to revolt. They're getting really angry.
Well, there's signs of it all around the world, yeah.
We can't channel it in that direction. That's actually a threat. So, you know, you got this half-bright billionaire reality star who doesn't know anything. He's not particularly interested in policy, does pretty much whatever the last person he talked to tells him to do. Yeah, let's prop that up and let's construct a whole fiction around this guy that if he wins, the establishment's been defeated. Only this is the really funny part. He'll just do exactly the same shit with a few cosmetic changes that don't really affect our agenda. That's what it looks like to me. If it looks like something else to you, explain to me why.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's more or less right. I mean, when you look, I mean, the way she presents, she never really struck me as a particularly sincere person. Just her whole presentation is just off. I don't know. There's something. I mean, that's a less sophisticated take than yours, but you know, it makes sense. It makes sense to me. It doesn't make sense that she's just that unscrupulous a person. It sounds to me like she's reading from some kind of script.
It
seems like a fit.
It does. The whole thing where the video we showed about the Africa op was so weird, where she's talking about fighting Al-Qaeda, but not like the bureaucrats in Washington. You're literally working for the bureaucrats in Washington.
There. Right, exactly.
You're literally doing operations that they tell you to go on.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, what you say about Trump there, I mean, I think that is more or less correct. And I think the reason it's more or less correct is because Trump is not a threat to the United States as a global hegemon. He believes the United States has a right to dominate the world. And that's really all that matters to the deep state. I mean, one way or another, they'll get that seventh war that they want. They'll get that war with Iran that they want. As long as nobody
Trump's
comes
not going to put a stop to it
and actually wants to tear that down, right? Actually challenges the premise that we have a right to dictate terms to the rest of the world because we are the number one imperial power.
What did Elon say? We'll coup who we want, where we want.
Right. Exactly. And this is why China is such a threat. This is why they're so threatened by China. Because when you look at China, it's like looking 100 years into the future. You look at a Chinese city, it looks like what we hope New York would look like in 100 or 200 years. Their technology is superior. It's a million times cleaner.
I was just watching a video from a girl who lived there. She was talking about how the technology is so far ahead of us. To make an appointment at the doctor, you just use an app and you go in and the pharmacy is there for you. Everything is the rail. Everything is so much more advanced. We could only dream of having what they have there.
You don't have homeless people all over the place. You don't have Daniel Penny, Jordan Neely episodes, right? And so any president that signals that they might cede power to China, that's out of bounds. But of course, Trump is as hostile to China as anyone else, if not more. And so, you know, when you think big picture like that, those are the questions that really matter to the people who really matter, right? This is a struggle between the ultra rich and the all powerful. It's like I said last time, it's the Maverick billionaires versus the Davos billionaires. And the Maverick billionaires are more entertaining, right? They're more punk rock in how they present, right? Elon,
go on podcasts.
Tulsi, right? You know, RFK. I'm not saying they're all billionaires, but they're in that team, right? They're of that house, shall we say? Yeah, it's more punk rock. It's more fun than Klaus Schwab, than Bill Gates, right? They just want the wheel. They just want the wheel to the car. They're not going to pull the car over and change and change anything, really. They want theirs. They want their turn.
Not anything that affects you.
They want to steer the ship. The ship is American Empire.
Taxes.
That's the ship. That's the ship. They want to steer it. They think they could do a better job, a more streamlined job.
Right.
And they think that they can convince the masses that it's in their interest to give them the wheel. And, you know, it's a challenging position to take because it's a position that ultimately leads to, well, what do you believe in? I believe in the Amazon workers. That's who I believe in.
Right.
Everything else is bourgeois bullshit. It's bullshit. It's smoke and mirrors. That's all it is. Like how you could get invested in any of these people. I give a shit about Tulsi Gabbard. I care about Tulsi Gabbard. Why?
Well,
what the hell do I care about Tulsi
Well, this
Gabbard?
is why I wanted to cover it, because I could see that they're setting up this premise that, wow, man, they're really scared of Tulsi Gabbard. Really? They're afraid of the commander of the PSYOP unit? Really?
Right.
That's what they're quaking in their boots. This person who 100% on board for Israel doesn't seem to have any principles that she won't compromise. Really? They're scared of that? That's what they're scared of? Why? Why would they be scared of this? I'm sorry. When I see things like this, it doesn't matter where it comes from. It doesn't matter if it comes from the libs. It doesn't matter if it comes from MAGA. It doesn't matter who it comes from. It's so transparently false. You just have to ask, why are all these people who are intelligent people, smarter than us, why are they pushing this narrative that Tulsi is a challenge to the deep state? Is it so that once they get her in there and she's an operative for the deep state, they can pretend that the people beat the deep state?
Right. Well, this is what I say. It's like the end of the Matrix 2, right? Where you kind of go, you kind of get thrown back to square one, right? Like everything you just watched was not necessarily planned, but it was accounted for, right? It's not that this was their plan. Yeah, sure, they'd rather Hillary, but it's accounted for.
We can work with this.
We can work with it.
We can work with it.
It's fine. It's fine. No one's going to come in there and actually question the legitimacy of the American empire, period.
Right.
That's what it all comes down to at the end of the day. Tulsi Gabbard, she's a fucking, she fights. She fights the wars. Like, what do you want? Like, I mean, that's what it comes down to. That's what it comes down to. As you just said.
She says the protesters are anti-Semites.
Yeah, they're anti-Semites.
I thought we're against that.
Right.
Like the same exact people who say, oh, she's going to take down the deep state are usually very against those ideas.
She said Biden's been too soft on Gaza because he's afraid of being called an Islamophobe. Really? He's been too soft on Gaza? There is no Gaza.
He's been too soft.
Yeah.
And this is what I really don't understand. I really don't understand people who have felt that views like that are disqualifying from Democrats are okay coming from figures in the Trump administration, from Trump himself.
Right.
Like, why is it okay coming from these people? At that point, why didn't you just vote for Harris? Like, really? Like, if your standards are that low, why? Why? Gabbard said, well, they're going to march us to World War III. I mean, these guys look like they're going to do a pretty good job based on what they're saying. Yeah. If you don't really care about these people being fanatical Zionists, if none of that really bothers you, why did you vote for them? Why did you vote at all?
Right.
Like, why vote for any of them? Well, I mean, we voted for Jill Stein, so we're not,
Right.
We didn't take ownership of either side, but I just don't understand why people were jumping up and down so much about the Gaza issue if you were going to turn around and support these people, and why you give them a pass. Why do they get a pass? Why?
Yeah.
Please clap.